Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. I think we already have quite a few people, and thank you for being on time. But we want to allow everybody, or at least a large part of the more than 100 people registered to actually join us. So we'll give everybody another couple of minutes before we actually start this great webinar together. Thank you for your patience. Again, thank you for joining. We're just waiting a few more seconds before we have everybody coming in the webinar. I see the number of attendees growing. Give it, let's say, another 30 seconds and we'll actually start the webinar. Thank you for your patience. All right, so it's 5 to 2 here in France, 4 to 2 in the UK, and I know that we have some people joining us from the USA. Good morning to you. So let's start the webinar. So I'm very pleased and honored to have you on this webinar. My name is Eric Bloom. I'm the managing partner for AKT Global, and I'm managing the Qualtrics practice for more than 3 years now. It's a very special moment in March 24. It's a very special moment to host that webinar together. Why that? Because actually, going into 24, we've seen numerous of our customers, if not most of our customers, asking us how to shift gears, how to move to the once in the year big annual engagement survey to something that will allow them to continuously take the pulse of their workforce, take the pulse of their teams, because they have so many transformation programs in flight, and they'd like to know how people actually experience this transformation program. Are people motivated, driving this transformation forward? Are they change agents, or are they surviving with this transformation program? The same happened with all the other training activity that happen. And I can name so many reasons to take the pulse of the people of the teams and to inform the front lines, inform the first line manager, inform all the companies who are at engaged in all these activities. It's also, as I just said, an element of who is this pulsing for, on how you actually shift from something that is centrally driven to something that is allowing the business unit, the teams, the division, the functions to actually drive with some autonomy these pulsing activities to create value on or confirm value of the program they're running. So during this webinar with Tugol and Simon, we will actually go in the depth of the new capability of Qualtrics in terms of technology, and how somehow things like AI or things like managing unstructured feedback are changing factors in the way you can do pulsing. We will also go into how the process can be revised, can be reviewed, can be upgraded to shift gears from centrally only driven employee experience management to much more distributed, federated activities. And that means that we're going to think about how we can embark more people in the driving seat for that pulsing, analytics, and action to constantly to have that as a new managerial behavior. So it's a broad agenda. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide. In 1 minute, I want just to let you know that who is AKT. We're one of the top 3 partner of Qualtrics in Europe. I'd like to think, we are actually viewed as a capability who can do strategic, helping you to pave the way on your EX roadmap, to actually help you drive the change across the ranks, and to create value by more adoption on these programs, making sure that you're always making the most of the technology that you're having. We're doing that with many customers. We're so happy and actually very proud to have the customer here on the board. And we're very also happy to actually use Qualtrics to consistently monitor the customer satisfaction of our customers. And Qualtrics is reporting that we have a 4.7 rate in terms of customer satisfaction. So we are very invested, very committed to actually help the market in Europe and in the US to constantly challenge the way experience management has been done over the last 20 years and make the most of what is available today and be prepared for tomorrow. Next slide. So I introduced myself. Now you're going to hear about our 2 very honored and distinguished panelists. The first one who's going to come is Simon Daly. Hello, Simon. So Simon is Strategy Director at Qualtrics based in the UK. He's coming with an incredible experience, not only coming from Qualtrics, but also coming from customers. And this is Simon, you had managing the employee experience management program at 3 and other customers. So very honored to have you as representative of Qualtrics, but also coming with a wealth of experience at the customer directly. Tugol, who is working in our practice here at AKT, is our senior advisor on employee experience. He's coming with also with a great level of experience, as he's been project manager, with other company. He spent 10 years with Conferry, so he's coming also with a lot of experience in the domain. So those 2 distinguished panelists will share with us, straight to the point elements, very pragmatic information, demonstration, to make sure that you have something that you can act upon when you leave that webinar. So let's go to the next slide. So Simon, I understand that you have a point of view about making a difference between employee experience and employee engagement. And it's right that most of the time we use that term instead of the other and vice versa. So help us understand what the difference and how that is actually making an impact about how we approach these programs.
Yeah, perfect. So great to have everyone on the call. Thanks, Eric, for the very kind introduction, and it's really great to be here. So let's take a step back a little bit and answer your question. So we hear organizations often talk about employee engagement. That tends to be a discussion point that we have constantly. But actually, employee engagement is just one single outcome. So it's the critical outcome as a product of all of the experience elements that happens throughout an employee journey. So it's important to understand those 2 things. So engagement being the output, but the experience that an employee has, those are the daily interactions, those touch points, all of that element together is the item that drives employee engagement and those critical people outcomes. So it's really good just to differentiate between the 2. And actually, I want to talk a little bit about why that's actually important. So why do we need to understand that, and why do we need to measure it and continually improve it? Well, the reality is we're in a landscape and a critical time at the minute where costs are really critical for people. Understanding return on investment, understanding why we do things, why we should invest in certain things. And actually what we can see is that a company that looks at an invested employee experience measurement and improvement over a period of, say, 36 months or 3 years, there is a fundamental, huge difference in terms of that lifetime value when you start to measure that experience. So if you think about that in terms of a per experience, the likelihood is someone will join an organization, they'll be super excited about being there, they'll be slightly disappointed they won't get the experience, and they'll leave. They'll vote with their feet, and they'll go and find another organization that will fulfill their needs, and they'll thrive within that organization. We know that they can be more productive. We know that we can have less regrettable attrition. You can have faster ramp time. They'll embrace the brand. There's a number of different categories there. But you can see that if you invest in the employee and the experience they have and measure it and improve, you have a sizable difference over a period of time. So let's kind of move on to the next one then and think about the core elements of this. And actually, it feels relatively simple. Actually, measuring that experience that we just talked about and all of the value that's associated with it, you could boil it down to 3 really simple things. Ultimately, we want to listen. You should listen to employees. That's around collection and conversations. You should understand what employees are saying, so actually analyze that and enable you to make decisions. And then ultimately act, because without the action piece, the first 2 elements almost become redundant. It's really important that you can get a route to action and that people can see demonstrated improvements as a result. Now we have moved forward, and you'll be able to see through this session itself how we've been able to improve continually how organizations do that. It's no longer just built into one large survey that's asked at one point in time owned by an HR function. Actually, there's a number of ways that you can listen to employees, understand what they're saying, and be able to drive action at a local level, at an organizational level, and even through automation. So there's a number of ways that organizations can really move these 3 fundamental pieces forward. So let's talk about kind of almost organizational maturity a little bit. So if we think about where things have moved forward over time, everyone's kind of familiar with the annual survey. In fact, it's something that hasn't necessarily gone away. It's stood the test of time. But actually, most organizations start with that large annual survey and are moving and progressing into pulsing. So that's a little bit more frequently in terms of connecting with employees to understand. But it doesn't have to stop there. You can actually continue then and think about those critical moments, or what I call the moments of highest emotional load. So those experiential points that people go through. Now, I've given some examples here. So I've talked about candidate onboarding training, but actually they could vary organization by organization. And AKT, I'm sure, could, and the team could talk to you about how they could really make that work within your organization. And then lastly, we talk about kind of targeted specific experiences. So that could be technology assessments, the ever ongoing discussion around hybrid working, health and safety, where you can do specific listening points to really understand what's happening at critical junctions in an employee journey. And what this does is this moves away from just asking a couple of questions sporadically where you don't get any depth, but you can actually build your program and build your maturity where you can really listen to people in a targeted way over a period of time to really drive improvements. Let's just pop to the next one, Turco, please. So I guess how do I see this kind of evolving over time? So I think that the program I've just talked about, people are at different stages of maturity and they can really start to build those out. But actually, this shifting gears that Eric talked about, we're going to start to move away from just the structured data points to starting to look at unstructured. So what are all those different connections and touch points, all those interactions and conversations that employees are having throughout their daily interactions, but actually just throughout their day-to-day lives? And how can you capture that to make informed decisions? We'll start to move from that kind of generic listening mechanism. So we talked about the annual survey piece, and move into real targeted listening. How can you really listen in at the point that's really critical for that employee so that you can understand what's happening but really understand how you can make that experience better. And then lastly, this piece around kind of collection. Let's move away from interactions specifically and think about almost that original slide around the journey that an employee has end to end. Those journeys will be different for lots of employees, but we'll find a way to really modernize employee listening when we connect the dots and listen to those journeys to make a difference for people. How does that sound, Eric?
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Perhaps I'd like to quote one of our customers recently. You know, it's always coming great from the customer when they call about the unstructured feedback. They told me with the structured feedback, we know the what, we know the engagement level, we know the intent to stay level. With the unstructured feedback, we know the why. So the fact that we get and we shift gears to the unstructured feedback is a big deal. But obviously, it takes a village to actually analyze all those verbatim, specifically if you go at scale. So the technology is playing a massive role in enabling us to actually get into the why rather than sticking to the what. So what most of the people in this webinar have already done is this corporate regulated annual survey or corporate regulated other type of survey that you're having. Most of the time, the objective of these actually surveys are actually aiming at informing executives. And by the way, consistency is one of the critical points, that year over year, quarter over quarter, you consistently operate that process so that you can compare the trends. You can value, monitor what is the impact of the action you have taken. And most of the time, it was somehow heavily consultancy driven or consultancy supported. As we are actually going into a world where, with all this transformation, the change in the organization, all the activities you're doing, you're moving into an appetite for continuous listening, most of the time actually triggered from the organizations around. You're going into how can I inform and how can I support all these different management lines. It calls for technology because at that moment, you get into like, how do I gain flexibility? How do I gain scalability? And how do I make sure that while I'm doing all that, empowering people to do the pulse when they want it, to who they want, for what they want, how do you make sure that all of that stay compliant when it comes to GDPR, data privacy, and all the other things? So that's what we're going to speak about now, is how the technology enables us to shift gears and move to this world of continuously pulsing from the management lines to gain this flexibility and scalability. So let's hear now from Tugral about how it does look like and how we are operating that from a product, technology, process, and people aspects.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. Again, thank you very much for joining. Very nice to be here and then very excited to be talking about this topic. So as Eric mentioned, the first thing that I'd like to show you actually is from a technology perspective, if you're talking about continuous listening, how easy it would be to set up a reoccurring pulse survey. So if I go to my Qualtrics account, I've already created an empty project for a reoccurring pulse. So considering that you're using Qualtrics, you can also do this yourself as well. So the first thing that we'll need to do is actually look at who we're sending the survey, how we're sending it, and what we're asking in the questions. So in terms of who we're sending the survey and how frequently we're sending it, I can go into my schedule and content, and I can actually update my schedule here by clicking on this button, and I can decide should the survey go out every week, every 2 weeks, every month, and I can make a decision on that. And I can choose a survey start date and a survey end date for the first one. And once I do that, the survey is all set on the right side, showing me that I have set a reoccurring pulse survey for the next months for this year. So this is how I'm sending out the survey. The next question is, who am I sending it out to? So if I click on my participants and sampling, you can see that I can easily go in and start choosing the people that I would like to pull in to this survey from the global directory. And by doing that, this shows basically that we have the connection with our HRIS on our end, and I can easily choose people from my global directory by choosing a very specific criteria, or by choosing the specific people. So for instance, if I'd like to send this recurring pulse to the people in a specific city or a country, I can choose that and I can define that. And once I do that and I include the people that I'd like to send the survey out to, then I can also choose what do I want to ask in the survey. So it's more about when I'm sending it, who I'm sending it to, and what I'm asking in the survey. And I can click on Edit Template. And once you click on Edit Template, you have the blocks ready for you to be populated where you can import questions or questionnaires or intros or outros from the vast majority of great content included in the Qualtrics library. So you can run a DEI survey, you can run a well-being survey. And when you click on these surveys, you can basically choose whatever you'd like to ask in that survey, depending on what you're trying to measure. That's how I do my survey as well. So the main aim of this exercise really, which I wanted it to take about a couple of minutes, is to show how easy it is for us to actually set a specific survey that can go out and can start collecting feedback from employees. And the key points to consider here is that using Qualtrics, I have my directory ready in the Qualtrics system that I can easily choose the people that I'd like to send to. I have the rich content of the questions that I can select from the questionnaire library that I'd like to use, or I can include my own questions, and I can very easily set the schedule and send it out to people when I'd like to. So the question then is, if it's this easy to actually set up and deploy a survey, why some organizations are struggling when it comes to continuous listening? If continuous listening is just scheduling a survey and then deploying it and then gathering the feedback. There's a very simple answer to this. It's because the technology enables us to actually set up and deploy surveys, start listening, start taking action very quickly, and it allows us to do that very flexibly and at a scale. However, there are some complexities in the background when it comes to actually putting this model at work and then scaling it in your organization. So let's try to focus on the individual level when it comes to continuous listening for a moment. So when I look at this picture basically describes continuous listening. I've seen different versions of this picture, different colors, different shapes, but basically it shows the employee life cycle, the employee journey within the organization. And it tells us that when it comes to continuous listening, we should be listening at moments that matter to employees, as Simon highlighted, because that's where we get all that really critical feedback. And that's where we can actually understand what are the points to improve the employee experience. So again, if we reflect back on just setting up a survey, deploying it, and getting the feedback, if it's that easy, why most organizations are struggling to move the needle on continuous listening? One of the answers to that is because sometimes it's hard to know who's doing what within the organization and who's doing when and who's deploying what and how they're listening to their employees locally and how the employees are being listened at a central level. So if we look at this picture shows us the spectrum of the continuous listening activities that are categorized as fully centralized or fully decentralized. And on the left-hand side, you basically have the description of the activities that are fully centralized. And on the right side, you have the description of the activities that are fully decentralized. And the interesting thing is, when I use this picture and ask my clients, can you show me, considering what you do in your organization, how you listen to your employees, can you show me where do you sit on that spectrum? The interesting thing is they typically try to put themselves in one very specific box. And then when we start talking about, okay, what is it that you actually do at the central and at the local level, we see that they're not actually fit in one box. They are scattered across different boxes. And this is because when we look at the continuous listening activities within an organization and who's doing what and who's listening to which part of the organization and what are they trying to understand and listen, these activities can happen simultaneously. So if we look at this example here, for instance, this organization here is using some group level surveys to actually understand the employee experience at the group level, where all of the company is taking part. And then there are some activities that are happening at the business unit level, where the business units locally are actually trying to listen to the employees on very specific points that are important to them. And as you can see at the group level, we are seeing the typical annual survey and a global pulse survey that are being sent out. And at the group level, at the BU level, we can see that some of these BUs are doing some of the on-demand pulse surveys, most probably because they are trying to understand or follow up on the survey that's been sent out, and they're trying to listen at points that matter to them locally so that they can take meaningful action. So when it comes to what is the risk to mitigate here to move the needle on continuous listening, there are a couple of elements to highlight. So when we think about the potential complexities that we see when it comes to continuous listening in organizations and looking at how they're tracking individual employee experience and how they're also tracking employee experience at the local level and at the central level, we're seeing some risks around not knowing who's doing what and who's deploying what. We're seeing some risks around deploying surveys that are not really in guidelines with the DPA or any kind of processes or procedures that are in place. And also sometimes we're seeing some local units doing their own thing, and then at the central level, the organization is trying to do something else. So we're getting inconsistent measurements of the key indicators of employee experience. So how can we mitigate that? In terms of mitigating these risks happening, there are a couple of actions that some of the best-in-class organizations are taking when it comes to moving the continuous listening on their end at scale. So they are coming up with clear roles and responsibilities in terms of who's owning what. They are having a strong governance in place, not to restrict the business units and not to restrict the local elements, but to empower them so that they can listen to things differently, but in a structured way. They are enabling and empowering their local champions so that they can drive the listening at the local level. And also they're giving them the flexibility, again, with the governance. And finally, they are focusing on closing the loop on the feedback. They're focusing on taking action, not just focusing on listening. So when we look, yeah.
Tughrul, we have a very good question. You know, I think the question relates to survey fatigue, you know, with what you proposed on the slide before, and I'm reformulating your question, you know, and thank you very much, by the way, to the person who raised that question, which is about survey fatigue, how we handle that. So, so yes, the technology allows to actually monitor, you know, which group by attributes, how often the people are being surveyed, at which frequency, and so on. That's one element. And so everybody is thinking about survey fatigue by having an absolute number in their mind about how many times somebody should be surveyed. Our point of view is that there is never too many asks for feedback. We try to step away from survey, because there is different way, as Simon said, to get feedback. It could be an intercept, that's feedback. It could be unstructured, it could be unsolicited feedback from different channels. So there is different ways to get feedback. So you never get, there's less of a point about defining a norm about survey that will drive to survey fatigue. It's all about the participation rate. So what we want to actually give with the technology is by category of employees, by job families, by division, by BUs, as stated here, how often are the people surveyed, A, and B, what the participation rate. So in the world of what we call manager-led survey, which is a specific set of implementation by Qualtrics, thank you Qualtrics, there is a way to actually give that insight, give that governance to the group level, and potentially to distribute that further out to the head of employee experience at the BU level to actually be able to drive that. So thank you for asking that. So that safeguard should actually allow you to think broad in terms of empowering BU and below at the front lines to pulse. So let's go to the next slide to actually move on. I'm just careful about the timeline. So yeah, who's doing what? Tughrul, you know, we spoke about technology, we spoke about organization, At the end, it's people who can drive that agenda and make that successful and valuable for the company. So I think a lot of our customers are somehow a little bit challenging about what are the roles, who does what at a bigger scale of the game.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the roles and responsibilities, it's important to know who's doing what, and this is one of the kind of best practice actions that we're seeing organizations setting up when it comes to setting up that continuous listening governance in place. And when we look at, for instance, the 3 typical types of users that are being set up on Qualtrics, we can actually understand and drive the continuous listening in the organization. We can see 3 specific types of, or 3 different types of users, who are the brand administrators, project administrators, and dashboard users. So the brand administrator is the person who have access to everything, they can really see everything, and they can also control everything. Where the project administrators, you can think of them as your local HRBPs or your local champions, who would have the power to actually deploy surveys, to be able to listen at moments that matter to employees locally, but then they won't have the same rights as the brand admin. They won't be able to see everything. They will only be restricted to see elements within their own business unit. And again, that goes back to the governance piece in terms of making sure that everyone has the right access within the organization when it comes to the listening piece, which I'll highlight a bit more. And then you have your dashboard users. So these are your typical managers or people leaders who are actually looking at the feedback to understand what is it that the employees are telling them, and who can actually start planning, taking actions. So when it comes to the governance, your brand admin is typically responsible from creating the governance to make sure that, as I've shown, there is integrations in place that you can, when you start listening, start using those integrations, leveraging those integrations to actually reach out to your people in the most easy way possible. And I think Eric probably highlighted the typical or the average integrations that we see with our clients. I think.
Hang on, Tegral. Yeah. So let's benchmark everybody. What do you think is a normal standard integration, level of integration, number of integration between the Qualtrics platform and the rest of the world?
That's a good question.
Okay, or if you are a Qualtrics customers, how many integration do you have? By the way, if one equal a connection to an SFTP server, yeah, that's hardly one.
That's standard.
Okay, and yes, it's 75%, Chris, is, 75% of the people have one integration, most likely with an SFTP to collect data from a CSV file coming from another place. In our view of making that environment something that perform at scale, that gives the level of automation to be a system of action, therefore having real-time data coming from the different employee database, we're looking at having anywhere between 4 to 5 live integration between the platform and the rest of the world. Multiple integration with, I have a customer right now, we're implementing one side of the organization is running SuccessFactors, another part of the organization is working with Workday. So immediately we have 2 in parallel workflows getting data real time from these 2 data sources. In parallel, they're distributing that by email, but they're also distributing that via SMS, and they're distributing that via Teams. 3. And then I have another one who is actually having, automatic ticket opening in ServiceNow based on lifecycle. 4. Okay, so when you start to look at the platform, you have like a list of workflows, serious workflows going between Qualtrics, rest of the world, in and out. That becomes a mission critical application in the world of HR. So I just want to, it's interesting to know where you stand on where the standards start to be. This is not a dream that I've just described. It's a large 40,000 consulting organization in Europe and in the USA. So the brand administrator, back to your point, Tegral, is driving that type of ship. Okay, that type of vessel. Okay, so it's not no longer a canoe. It's something slightly more modern. So let's move to the next thing. So with that, if you go to the next slide, okay, Does it mean that it has an army of developers to manage all those things? I was very interesting to hear yesterday Brad Anderson, the Chief Product Officer of Qualtrics, saying that they have anywhere in the like of 140 connectors between Qualtrics and the rest of the world. So that is making like super easy to plug as long as you know how to do it. But what is interesting is what you look at this integration, it's the integration about the data, it's integration about the process, it's integration about the UI. So if you are a SuccessFactors customer, you can see here on the slide that you could actually have some Qualtrics within the SuccessFactors user interface. You could have Qualtrics within the WorkZone interface, but you can also have Qualtrics in Microsoft Teams. So we're not going to double click on that because we're somehow derailing from continuous listening. But it's important that the fact that you can nudge Qualtrics in all those different UX, make it pervasive, make it easy to become a continuous pulsing, continuous reporting type technology for people to act on it. So let's move to the next slide, back to you on what it's all about. So when I have all this data flowing, what's happened? Because everybody can see everything, Pop's not, isn't it? Tugro?
Yeah, that's the second point that I wanted to highlight when it comes to the governance. So as you said, you can have all these integrations to make it as easy as possible to the users to actually bring in the data, take actions. But then as we are setting up that governance, one of the things and one of the best practice actions that we see from the organizations who are moving the needle on continuous listening at scale is that they are giving actually not the restriction, but basically the access they need for the project administrators. So that, for instance, if a project administrator is sitting in Germany and let's say the BUs are set up by by different regions, then you don't want that same person to be sending surveys to another BU or seeing the sorry, I think there's a bit of a background noise. Or seeing the results for the other BUs as well. So this restriction actually comes in handy to make sure that everyone is seeing what they're supposed to see. And again, it's one of the most important points to make sure that everything is being set up within the rules and the DPA and also the processes in place within the organization. So in terms of giving project administrators the flexibility to actually set up their survey and flexibility to actually deploy their listening programs locally, again, that comes in within that governance in terms of understanding, okay, what is the type of access that we're giving to the project administrators in terms of what they should be seeing, what they shouldn't be seeing, and also what's the type of power that I'd like to give to them. So for instance, I'd like to give them the power to be able to deploy their surveys locally. And once we start defining what kind of power that we're giving to these project administrators, one of the key points that we need to consider is that we need to make sure that they're enabled and that power comes with governance as well. So as you've seen when I was trying to set up the Pulse survey, I had the questionnaire libraries that were available to me, or when I was trying to pull in the people, I was restricted in my area. So that's the kind of governance that we're looking to give the project administrators so that if they like to measure well-being, they're measuring it consistently with other parts of the organization so that when we start to compare different parts of the organization and understand which part is stress, which part is not, which part is doing well managing stress or maybe the workload, we have a consistent way of measuring those key outcomes. And finally, we will talk about utilizing the feedback in the right way, because we talked about collecting the feedback, having the governance in place to be able to collect feedback consistently. But as I mentioned at the beginning of my section, one of the key and the most important things that we're doing this activity is because we would like to understand where we can improve and also improve on these areas, which takes us to the action planning part of things when it comes to continuous listening. So when it comes to action planning and doing that at scale through continuous listening, what we want is we want to make it as easy as possible to managers to be able to understand their results and take actions. And we want to make it and keep it as simple as possible for them, so that when they log into the platform, they can see everything in one place, they can see all their thoughts in one place, and they can see what's happening again all in one place. And that brings us to the Manager Assist, which I'd like to show you how actually this works in real life. Because as you can imagine, a manager in an organization could be bombarded with loads and loads of different feedback outcomes. What we want to do is we want to actually feed that feedback back to managers in a structured way, and make it as easy as possible for them to be able to take actions. So I am moving on to the Manager Assist module to show you actually how easy it is for managers to see all the outcomes being collected in one place under the Manager Assist module, for them to actually see everything in one place and take action on the results that they're getting. So if I'm a manager, let's say I'm Eric, I'm the manager, and I log into my Qualtrics platform and I go to Manager Assist, I'm actually able to see my results. I'm able to brainstorm my results with my team, and I can see all my action plans in one place, so I can understand how I can best utilize that data. So if I click on view my results, you will see that all the projects and all the surveys, all the listening posts that relates to me are in one place under this library. And this makes it extremely easy for managers to actually go and check their results. They can just click on go to the dashboard, and it will take the Manager Assist will take them to the dashboard, so that they can understand what that listening activity was telling them about their team. Because if you imagine listening to your organization as a conversation that's happening at scale, these are basically different conversations as a manager that I'm having with my organization. So I'm trying to talk to people who are leaving the organization. I'm trying to talk to people through my pulse program. I'm trying to talk to people who are joining the organization. And all these conversations are stored in here. And I can just click on them and see what the conversation is telling me. So once I understand what the conversation is telling me, I don't want to go into the dashboards, as that might take some time. What I'd like to do is I'd like to utilize the feedback. So one thing that managers can do is that they can brainstorm ideas with their teams before actually they decide which actions they can utilize. So as you know, in the dashboards, when you see the results, you can have pre-populated actions for managers, again, making it as easy as possible for them to utilize the feedback, so that they can see the pre-populated or recommended actions for them on areas that they can improve. And once they do that, what they can do is that they can create what we call brainstorming their ideas with their teams. So they can bring it to the whiteboard, they can include the ideas that they would like to actually discuss with the teams, and they can very easily get their teams to rank the ideas to understand, okay, if I'm thinking of taking potentially 3 actions, which one is the one that my team thinks will be the most effective? And people can actually click on these ideas and rate them, so that it makes it easier for manager to understand what is it that they can do that will drive meaningful change. And finally, once you decide on what to act on, then you can go and see all your actions that you're logging in as a manager in one place. And again, this makes it extremely easy for managers to actually go and think and say, okay, this is the area that I would like to act on, so that it can help my team. And any ideas or any actions that I'm logging, it doesn't matter from which conversation they're coming from, I will be able to see them all in one place again as a tool of action for me to understand how they're progressing, update my status on it, or update the action if needed. But that's a good to-do list for the managers when it comes to actually utilizing the feedback. And that makes it, again, very user-friendly for managers to go, okay, these were the actions that I wanted to take. So I can just log them here and I can come back and update them. But everything that I'm having from these conversations are stored here. I'll pause here. Eric, is there anything that you would like to add in terms of Manager Assist? I have to say I was very excited when I first saw the Managerist when it came out, and I still love it.
I think it's a game changer in a way, or in many ways, but specifically one, as you have shown to you, the plan of action. You can see all your plan of action consolidated on one panel. Before, you had to go into each dashboard to actually figure out what are your plan of action plans at play. Now, as a manager, I can go there and I can see all consolidated by action plan. And by the way, if you click on non-started, I can easily, if you click on not started button, click here, and you can see, I can say, I'm starting it, I've done 25%. Can you do that?
So I can go.
Oh, you completed, you're good. All right. So you see, it's we make it very easy for the managers to go for action, but also to report on the progress of action. And of course, then all the people in charge of this program can actually see the progress of this action, how they're being adopted, and at a later stage, relate those action plans that have been done, completed, with the impact on the next pulse. Remember, the theme of the day is continuous pulsing. So instead of taking 3 action on that annual survey and waiting for a full year to see what's coming on, then you have all this list of survey, of activities, you take an action on this one, you take an action on this one, and you can monitor on the next pulse, because now we are executing every month, see whether the results are trending high or low. It's a completely different way of actually really engaging with the frontline managers, but also engaging with the employees. So if you go back to the deck now, it's all about where you start. Numbers of the customers are doing already an annual engagement survey. It's been here for long, either with Qualtrics or with somebody else. And the question is, now we want to go, or they have started with 360 as well. That's another typical one. Now they want to actually shift gears. So the question we're having is like, okay, can you manage history if it is not on Qualtrics? Short answer, yes. The platform is super flexible. We can migrate, we can lift and shift your history onto the Qualtrics platform. So you are actually securing the consistency that I spoke about with the annual survey thing. Now that you have established that, and you can secure, this baseline, you can actually look about where you start on the other things. So a typical activity that we're doing with customers is to review that map. We call that vision, blueprint, and roadmap. Where you now, where you next, where you next. In other terms, now, next, the future. That's where we can help you, because there are some natural sequences that you want to think about that are driven by your capabilities, your maturity, driven by also your internal, your HR digital stack, also driven by other factors. And by the way, each of those different boxes have a little roadmap in itself. So that's really one thing we would like, as you're starting to think about, or you have the requirements to go continuous listening, there are many ways to slice the elephant. And apparently some people were like, what does it mean? Perhaps it's a French translation direct to English, but there is how do you attack that? And how do you pave your way? So with this is where we can help you with. Next slide. And to do that, there are a lot of technology available at Qualtrics. So there are different models. And by the way, Qualtrics is coming with a new architecture that helps you to simplify that. But still, it's interesting that we can, during this vision, blueprint, roadmap, identify what are the unique capabilities that you need to execute on that roadmap. Therefore, what are the common capability, the unique capability, on what kind of models, what kind of solution, what kind of suite you need, because the journey or the appetite for all of us is to actually start to become more into having a platform on a suite to actually give you all the flexibility to maneuver on your roadmap as the requirements coming on. Next slide. So yeah, it's what are the next steps? One of the things that we're starting to do more and more is shifting, is all again, moving from we must do this, we must do the annual survey, it's kind of like a regulatory type thing, to all this continuous listening. So people start to think about what's the business case. Show me the value. Okay, so in that point, we have now established together with Qualtrics a way to help you not only to scope and roadmap, but also to establish what is the business value associated to that. Working on, say, attrition, productivity, ramp up and onboarding. There are a number of metrics that we can look at, looking at your HRIS platform, looking at the data, analyzing this data, and looking at what are the areas of potential improvement that you could do by providing the insights the manager need to take on their ability to take action. Of course, we want to empower you. So there is a strategic design, there is an implementation, there is an advisory, we're putting the platform, but what we want to do is actually to help you think about how to become more and more autonomous. It's all about empowering the BUs, empowering you, building that center of excellence. So we have created new at AKT a set of new offerings. One of them is around training. So training, obviously, on the platform, you go on Basecamp, Qualtrics, you get all the online training on the current platform that you need. But if you want to actually take it to the users, the managers, how do I train the managers to actually digest the action, the manager assist? How do I bring the soft skills to the next level to be able to act on that? We have actually created some on-demand training online with manager readiness assessment, so that you can make sure that what you deliver will be, really used and acted upon by all the management lines. We are providing customer success packages, so that once you train, once you're comfortable with the platform, you can still call on us, on some people who have an insight on your platform and can advise you about how to use the next level of depth of the technology to make sure you make the most of it. And three, as you're deploying the things at scale, we think that users deserve support. So it's either you're creating that support function internally, say on your service desk platform, people can come, create a ticket, and this ticket can be escalated to support level 2 and 3, and people can get that level of support. Or you cannot. And that can be a break, kind of like a break on your way to continuous listening. So we at AKT have actually created a service desk functions dedicated to people who want to take EX at scale and be able to support all the user community, all the dozens, if not hundreds of HR business partners, the hundreds, if not thousands of managers, and give them the support that they need when they actually start to use all the things that we have shared with you. So as you can see, I started to say it's about product. And I hope if we go to the next slide, we spoke about product, we spoke about process, we spoke about people, we spoke about organization. And when we think about that, we'd like to think about that picture being an interesting representation of what we're trying to do. Okay, there's a lot of people playing the music here, a lot of manager on the show, right? And by the way, interesting enough, if you have ever played music, it doesn't start with the instruments. It starts with your ears. The best way to play music is to listen to the other before you start playing your instrument. So listening is super important for all the managers to understand what's happening around and how they actually, execute on the partition, on the music sheets that are there. And they need someone to help them coordinate that when they play together. And that for the people who are in the room, okay, and can listen. So if I go to the next slide, we'd like to thank you. First, we nearly lost nobody during the full hour, so I'd like to thank everybody for your passions. I also would like to thank those who actually been participating, contributing to the question. So thank you very much for making that webinar alive and kicking, hopefully. And hopefully you get the sense that there is a real passion shared by Simon, Turgrul, myself, and the entire community of people at AKT and beyond, and our dear customers, to actually shift gears, help you get into that moment where the technology can help. So that will be my closing statement, thanking everybody and saying about how we turn the dial, and actually take a meeting. I'd like for you to book your agenda for May. The date will come soon, so that we can come and share with you how we're going to drive the next level of the agenda with EX on AI. In May, there will be some GA capabilities within Qualtrics that will enable us to move from add on continuous listening, personalized action plans, personalized assistance. So I'm not going to disclose too much, but I think the word is already out in a way. So we will come back to you with feedback on our early implementation with that, and hopefully you will find very instructive as well. Thank you everybody. We'll get connected with you. We'll connect back to get your feedback and see how we can help moving on. Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. Thank you to Guru. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.